again for the NFCC for another discussion, live discussion. Today's topic is one that I can't wait to get into. We're going to be talking about housing issues and resources available for renters, for homeowners, for landlords. It's an especially challenging time right now. There are a lot of people in need, and the good news is that we can help raise awareness of some of the resources that are available out there, how people can reach out to get help if they need it, and what type of help is available. And joining me for this discussion, thankfully, because I can't carry this topic on my own, folks, is an expert from NFCC, Herman Palmer. He's the VP of Housing Programs for the NFCC, and he joins me today. Herman, welcome. Thank you so much for being here to talk about this really important topic.
Bruce, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, first of all, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Doing well. We're busy. There's a lot going on, a lot of people who need help, and fortunately, there are a lot of resources and organizations that want to help. So we're trying to combine the two.
Yeah, it certainly has been a busy time, and I know you've been working especially hard on the housing side, making sure that people are taken care of and making sure that our agencies out there are equipped with the information and the resources they need. So much going on, and really this is an interesting time, and that's an understatement, especially with the timing of all that's going on with legislation that could extend certain protections, with questions about what's happening state by state with rental protections. And then, of course, there are other things that are indirectly connected to the housing conversation, like what's going to happen with the next round of stimulus checks, all of that. So we're going to get to all of that. But what I want to start out with at the top of the discussion is just to ask a simple question about what's making it most difficult right now for people to preserve their housing situation, whether they're renters or homeowners.
Well, unfortunately, we are living at a time when the COVID-19 pandemic is absolutely wreaking havoc with all kinds of economic turmoil, not just with our economy, but the world economy. And with that, we're seeing unprecedented economic uncertainty, resulting in massive layoffs and furloughs that are not just hammering one industry or sector, but it's actually occurring in multiple. I mean, it's pervasive. And unless an individual or household was fortunate enough either not to be affected or was able to fairly quickly replace lost or reduced income, or unless they were able to successfully manage their finances and live on a budget that allowed them to accumulate savings, it's very likely they're feeling more than a little pinch. And so in a nutshell, it's lack of income, reduced income, and insufficient savings. But here's another dynamic. What I've just said speaks to the money that's coming in. The other side of the equation is there's another piece, the money that you have going out, your financial obligations and expenses. They're still there. I mean, the organizations and the individuals you owe, they still want their money. So what happens is that people find themselves very often, through no fault of their own, find themselves with not enough money coming in and too much money going out. And at some point, people are forced to make choices, such as, are you going to eat today, or are you going to pay the rent or mortgage 2 weeks from now? Everyone has a hierarchy of needs. And as a result, they make their decisions based upon that hierarchy and how pressing their immediate need is.
Yeah, and there's a tight squeeze on people who have limited resources right now, and the creditors they owe are ratcheting up the intensity of communications and collections efforts. But there are resources out there, obviously, to help people out, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But what's really different right now about the landscape of the experience that homeowners and renters are facing, compared to what it was like a couple of months ago when we were just heading into the thick of the COVID-19 crisis, and that first wave of layoffs were happening and people were really experiencing hardships? What's different now for renters and homeowners than it was a couple of months ago?
One thing is employment. I mean, watching the news, we see the numbers of COVID-19 cases rising. We see the number of COVID-related deaths rising. And as a result, States are rethinking their decisions to stay open or reopen. And with that, there is a corresponding impact on jobs. We see unemployment numbers going up. We see bars closing, restaurants closing, hotels, salons, barbershops, and a whole host of industries that are all being impacted by this. And with those industries, it also affects the employment opportunities. So if anything, one could argue there's significantly more pressure now than there was a month or two ago. For example, the supplemental $600 weekly unemployment benefit that was available is now gone, and it may not be coming back. And if it does, the buzz that we're hearing says that it's going to be reduced from $600 to possibly as low as $200 a month. So if you do the math, that's $1,600 a month just gone out of a family's budget. That's a problem. That's a major problem. And it also leads to another challenge. One example would be different today versus month or 2 months ago, housing security. And by housing security, I mean, how comfortable, how secure is a family, individual in the knowledge of they'll be able to stay where they live? Unfortunately, now it's a lot different than what it was.
Yeah, and it's not just insecurity, it's confusion as well. I think there's a lot of confusion. There are conflicting messages. There's some misinformation that's getting to renters and homeowners.
Absolutely.
That makes it even more difficult and more stressful for people who are feeling that tight financial squeeze and are facing some pretty dire circumstances when it comes to preserving their housing status. So that leads me to the next question, which is that will help add clarity to that issue, is what resources are available right now for homeowners who are struggling. We'll start with homeowners, and then afterwards we can talk a little bit about renters. But what's available right now for homeowners?
One thing, through the CARES Act, they are now available is forbearance. And forbearance is when your mortgage servicer or lender allows you to either pause or reduce your payments for a limited period of time. But I want to stress, forbearance does not erase what you owe. You still owe that money. And so you will have to repay any missed or reduced payments sometime in the future. But what it does is it helps to give you a breather. And the good news is there's not going to be any adverse implications as a result. I mean, you're not going to have any negative reports going to the credit unions about as a result of non-payment. There's not going to be any fees or late fees or anything like that. All that gets waived. So it gives you the opportunity, you the homeowner who's experiencing financial difficulty, an opportunity to catch your breath, develop a plan, and then implement that plan or seek help. But the key thing is to get forbearance, you have to reach out to the lender and let them know you have a COVID-related issue.
Right, and that's important. It's one of the things that I've been talking about for months right now. One of the keys to success here in finding the right solutions is communication. Reach out, be proactive, communicate
Absolutely.
with vendors, communicate with your utility companies, everybody that you owe money to, communicate with your family, everybody who has a stake in your financial stability and your capability. Reach out and have a conversation with them. But one thing I want to mention about forbearance that's also really important, it was something I talked about in the news recently, was the fact that some people who've enrolled in these forbearance programs have gone and checked their credit and found that the lender was not reporting it accurately to the credit bureau, or the credit bureau was not reporting accurately what the lender was providing in terms of the status of the forbearance. And as a result, people's credit scores were damaged, and they've had to go back and take care of that. What would you recommend people do to try to prevent those types of situations?
That speaks to the need to make sure, one, you're checking your credit report, because you hear in the news it's forbearance, there's not going to be any adverse reporting or whatnot. And so you cannot make the assumption that just because the plan is outlined this particular way, that all things don't go necessarily as planned. So you have to do the due diligence to protect yourself and check your credit score. And if you see that, then report it and work with the lender to get it corrected. Reach out to your lender and say, hey, I noticed this on my credit report. That's not supposed to be. So now we have to get involved and put together a plan to get that information removed from your credit report.
Right. And to check the credit report, people can go to annualcreditreport.com, which is the website that was established by the three major credit reporting agencies to give you free access. And the good news is that in response to the coronavirus pandemic, annualcreditreport.com is offering free access to your credit report from each of the three major credit reporting agencies on a weekly basis. It was annual, now it's weekly. So there's no excuse for people not to be checking on a regular basis and then acting quickly to report those errors. So thank you for helping address that issue.
Got to be proactive. Got to be proactive.
Yeah. And then, so beyond forbearance and the option to hit the pause button on payments and get a little bit of a breather, there are some homeowners, though, who are, in an all right financial position, and they can make their payments, they can keep things on track. Mm-hmm. And they've been asking if it's the right time to refinance, and especially in situations where they just want to be prepared for what might lie ahead in terms of financial challenges and do cash out refinancing. Is it a good time to refinance?
We've been talking about the financial challenges people are experiencing as a result of COVID and the coronavirus pandemic. And everything we said about the difficulty is absolutely true. However, with interest rates as low as they are, and as much as it seems to contradict everything we're seeing now, is absolutely a great time to refinance a house or even buy a home if you're able. Because here's the reality. Based upon the numbers we're seeing as it relates to buyer behavior, activity is actually increasing, and it's doing so aggressively. As a proof point, I'll ask those listeners in the audience to consider this. If you live in a community or single family houses and a house has gone on the market, has that house stayed on the market for a long period of time, or is it moving within a 2 to 3 week period, if not shorter? A lot of the information I'm getting is that it is absolutely a hot market, and that's driven by the fact that interest rates are so low. And so you want to make sure that you take advantage of this time in terms of low interest rates. But if you do look to refinance, one thing I want to make sure you take care of is just make sure the interest rate or the terms of the new loan are better than the loan you already have.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very important detail. The offer may look attractive, but if it doesn't work out right, if the numbers don't add up and they don't work out for your circumstances,
right,
then walk away, shop around, look for something else.
Exactly.
It's a competitive market.
And if you don't understand it, walk away.
Yeah.
Anything you don't understand.
Exactly. So anything else that you want to talk about in terms of homeowners, and especially in terms of negotiating terms for payment if you're having a hardship situation? Absolutely.
One other resource is there are utilities that have moratoriums going out too. But getting back to forbearance, you can what that means is you have, I want to say this right. So think of it this way. Lenders are in the business of financing mortgages. That's how they make money, and they don't want to foreclose. That's a last ditch option. They want to see people stay in their homes and pay their mortgage. That's how the model was built to work. Mm-hmm. So that's their standard operating protocol. In this environment where you have the pandemic running rampant, the government through the GSEs meaning government sponsored enterprises, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, has put into place the forbearance program. But the way the program works is you can have an initial 6-month period where you can have reduced payment or no payment. That doesn't mean you have to take that full 6-month period. You might just need one, so you can negotiate down from the 6 months. You might decide when you apply for forbearance, you may think that you need only 2 months of forbearance. And then 2 months pass and you realize, my situation has changed, but not to the extent I thought. I need 2 more months. You can go back and ask for the 2 more months as long as it's within that 6-month tranche. And here's the other news. If you go through that 6-month tranche and you still need more time, there's a second 6-month term you can apply for. So it can go up to 12 months. But here's the thing. Again, it's not free money. You are going to have to pay it back. So try not to take more than you need, because you just might be creating a headache down the road.
Yeah, and another good thing to remind everybody of as well, with when it comes to these modified repayment terms, especially over the extended, you were talking about the 6-month period and whether or not you use it in full or not. Again, your credit should not be taking a hit in those situations.
Right.
So
Right.
just make sure you understand that when you're negotiating with your mortgage lender, and also make sure you're checking again. So thank you for mentioning those resources. Now let's move on to renters. What
Sure.
resources are available for renters?
Okay, so the renter eviction moratorium is one big one. So what that means is there are a number of state and local resources that are available. Many state and local governments have stopped eviction proceedings from going forward. You also have the national eviction moratorium. But to find out for your state and local option, you want to go to, let me see, there's a resource I pulled up. You want to go to find out your state and local eviction moratorium, go to the Eviction Lab.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you can find out, what some options are on the state level. Another resource, many states have suspended public utility disconnections. So to determine what protections that might exist in any particular state, I would suggest that people check in with their state utility commission. So that's another resource.
Yeah, I've seen some stories in the news. In fact, this is another example of news that is pretty recent. A major city was already starting to threaten to disconnect people's utilities, so water utilities, shut off water.
Yeah.
For non-payment. So that's a good reminder that there is in these types of situations, there's no uniform protection across the board for utilities. So it is on a county by county, city by city, town by town, state by state basis. And for rental protections, it can be on a state by state basis as well. There can be variance between the type of protection against eviction. So those two resources, and again, just to repeat those for those who were tuned in. The first one was, what was the first one again? Rental Lab?
It was the Eviction Lab.
Eviction Lab.
Yeah.
Eviction Lab. And the other resource that you mentioned?
The other one is, let's see, basically it's your state utility commission.
Okay, great. Yeah, good resources. Everybody should check those out. And again, those are free resources, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So getting back to renters, you talked about the national protection. That's part of the I guess that's part of the CARES Act.
It's part of the CARES Act, and the CARES Act was actually launched March 27th, and it's provided 120 days of eviction relief for tenants. But for tenants who are in federally backed housing, meaning those properties that have a mortgage that's backed by Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, FHA, VA. What this protection means specifically is that the tenant cannot be served with an eviction notice until July 25th of this year. And we all know it's July 30th.
Yeah.
So not to worry. The CARES Act further requires that a landlord or a property owner must give a tenant 30 days to leave the property.
Okay.
So that 30 days carries you to August 24th. So from now till then, the hope is you'll be able to resolve whatever issue and stay in the property in the unit that you're living in now. But should that not work out, you have time to put together a plan and identify an alternate place to live once you relocate from the current situation.
But just to be clear, the moratorium on eviction proceedings has already come and gone, and the 25th is now behind us. So it is possible that landlords in these properties with federally backed mortgages can be taking the initial steps that they
absolutely
take towards eviction of their tenants. Correct?
Absolutely. They can start that, but they cannot force you to leave before August 24th. Now, here's the other thing. That's for federally backed properties that have mortgages with them, to find out whether your property is covered and meets that requirement, whether it's has a mortgage held by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. There are certain resources. There are certain lookup tools. And so the Freddie Mac lookup tool is myhome.freddiemac.com/renting/lookup.html. The Fannie Mae lookup tool is www.knowyouroptions.com/renters resource finder.
Okay, and just quickly for the audience, we'll make sure we post these links so it's a little bit easier. Some of these are really long URLs, so we want to make sure you get that.
Yeah, and I apologize for that, but
no, don't apologize. You didn't write those URLs.
here's the other part. What we just talked about, that speaks to federally backed housing situation where, you're backed by Freddie Mae, Fannie. Unfortunately, there are situations where they're not. So you just have to, look up those tools and look into your state and local, like you were saying before, to determine whether or not there are some other resources that you can plug into to help you. And again, there's also utility help.
Yeah. But real quickly, going back to the federally backed mortgages, is there any requirement that the landlords in those situations have to inform their tenants that they are living in a property that's backed by a federally backed mortgage?
Unfortunately, they may not. There's no requirement, and they may not. So again, you have to be proactive. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to look up the information that's going to benefit you. Right. And there's one thing I want to identify here. Sometimes landlords catch a bad rap because in many cases they're entrepreneurs just trying to make ends meet too, and they rely on the rent that's being paid to them to maintain the properties they own. So when they don't get that rent, they're not able to maintain the property. So, I want to make sure we cast them in a favorable light. Like they're trying to make ends meet too.
And a lot of them are relying on the rental income for their own livelihood, and just
absolutely.
When that stream stops, they're hurting too. They're hurting too.
Absolutely.
So going back to these resources and talking, I guess, getting back to the issue of reaching out and getting help. How are nonprofit counseling agencies like NFCC serving the needs of renters and homeowners during this time of crisis?
What I would tell you is this, and I apologize because I'm gonna go off on this because I'm very passionate about this. These agencies, these counselors, they have the training, the expertise, the experience, the resources, and the connections through their strategic partnerships to gather and deploy critical resources and solutions that meet the needs of people who are impacted by this pandemic, individuals who, for whatever reason, are experiencing some type of financial difficulty. And best of all, they have the certified counselors who are specifically trained and certified by the government or other organization that's trusted to help the public. They assess their financial situation. They evaluate options if you're having trouble paying your mortgage or loan or whatever. They help you make a plan to get where you need to go. And in the case of housing, they really help you in terms of buying a house or maintaining a house. But here's the important part that so many people lose. They don't judge. They don't gossip. They don't profit. There's no commission to them. So they're doing this work to do the right thing. The sole purpose is to help deliver tailored solutions that meet each individual's unique need. So I want to say this. There's no shame in asking for help. And some of the most educated professionals in the world do it all day, every day. And doctors do it, lawyers do it, government officials do it, large corporations do it. But when they do it, it has a fancy name. It's called a consultation. So here's the difference. I'm no different. If I have a problem or issue, I want help, and I want the best help. And anybody listening to this, they're going to want that too. So I'll say it differently. When I was an athlete growing up, I was an athlete from being a little kid to going to college. And when I wanted to take my performance to the next level, I would consult a subject matter expert. And that subject matter expert was my coach. And we had consultations every day, especially in games or in meets. That is exactly what a counselor is. A counselor is a coach by a different name. and they're there to help. They have the resources to help. You don't know what you don't know, but they can help bring you up the learning curve to get you the resources they already know exist. They have the URLs, they have the telephone numbers, they can make the calls and the partnerships. So please use them, and take advantage of the resource that's available. And if you want to find one, come to nfcc.org.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning all of those things. I mean, as a former counselor myself, I appreciate the way you talked about that, because it is right the way you framed it. This is a consultation, and you owe it to yourself and your family to reach out and talk to someone about making the most of your finances, getting beyond financial challenges, and talking to a nonprofit credit counseling agency and going to the NFCC. You're dealing with a nonprofit agency that is focused on you and your goals. And you're talking to a financial professional that doesn't just have the certification and the training that Herman mentioned, but in many cases, and this was true in my own case, they're coming to that position with a background in lending or debt collections or other financial services. And they're giving you the benefit of all of their years of experience sitting on the other side there, working as lenders, as debt collectors, as financial professionals. And you have access to that at very low or no cost. In fact, the initial consultation is free.
Yep.
So it's a tremendous resource. Please take advantage of it if you're in a situation of need where you're looking for guidance, you feel like you're up against a wall, you have big financial challenges, and you don't know where else to turn. It's a safe place to find solutions for your financial challenges.
One thing I would ask, don't operate on mis and disinformation. Find out for yourself. A lot of times in certain communities say, don't put your business in the street, don't talk about it. Guess what? If the help is there and it's committed to your success, there's no shame in asking for help. Just make sure you ask the right resource.
Right. There is a lot of misinformation out there. Go to trusted resources.
That have been vetted by the government.
Yeah, exactly. And go straight to some of the government agencies themselves, the Federal Trade Commission, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They all have information about the financial options in front of you, nonprofit credit counseling and other choices that you might be considering. So be fair to yourself and to your situation, and go and get all the information you can and make an informed decision. Very good points, Herman. That pretty much wraps it up for us. I think we're up against time. So thank you for being on this live stream.
Thank you.
You know we're going to have you back again. So
I'm too shy.
So thank you for answering all the questions on these topics. And folks who tuned in, if you're watching it and it's not live and you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. NFCC.org has a great resource called Ask an Expert. If you have questions, you can submit your questions. All questions are answered, and you can reach out and get help there as well. And if you need to connect to a counselor, you can go to nfcc.org. You can plug into a counseling session, and you can get help for your most immediate needs. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.